Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Beth.
Hi, I'm Beth Gantz. I'm a small business coach at the Small Business Development Center at Lorain County Community College. And I'm joined today with Chris Corpus of Corpus Law Inc. Chris is a small business lawyer, a friend of the SBDC, and works with a lot of our clients. And so today, Chris, I wanted to chat about the Corporate Transparency Act. We're also hearing it called beneficial ownership information. So I'm going to put the slides up, and this is something brand new that every small business needs to be aware of.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so we'll get started. So Chris, please introduce yourself. And
Yep. Thank you. My name is Chris Corpus. I'm a business attorney with, as Beth said, Corpus Law Inc. I've been doing this for, heavens, 23 years now. Just like you guys, I'm an entrepreneur, started my own law firm back in 2016, going on 7.5 years now. Time flies. And yes, we're here to talk about this Corporate Transparency Act today, and hopefully kind of get rid of some of the questions or myths that may be floating around out there.
So tell us more about this new law and how it affects you as a small business owner.
Yeah, so this is a federal law. It was begun under consideration back in 2017, and notably, it was passed with bipartisan support in 2021. Probably one of the few things that Republicans and Democrats actually agreed about. And it wasn't just like one member of the other party agreed. This was, it truly was bipartisan support. And the whole real purpose for the law is to combat money laundering, illegal activities, sanctions avoidment, shell companies created where illegal activities are done, and law enforcement cannot locate who the owners of these companies are. Because if you create a company in Ohio and with your filings with the Ohio Secretary of State, the owner's name does not need to be on the articles that are filed to create the company. The owner does not have to be the one to sign the paperwork to create the company. There's no private database, non-public database within the Secretary of State indicating who the owners are of the company. There's no public database indicating who the owners of the company are. Unlike other states do have that, Ohio doesn't. So quite frankly, Ohio is one of the reasons why this law is passed, is due to the secrecy of who, or privacy of who, these owners of these companies are. So, okay.
So what businesses must comply with this?
Yeah, so this is a huge sweeping law. In general, every small business has to comply. There's going to be, hundreds of millions of businesses caught up in this net of who have to file and comply with this law. So it's the odd business that will not have to comply. There are 24 exceptions written in the law, but ultimately this law is truly geared towards small businesses.
Okay.
And so there are exceptions, which we will talk about in the next slide, I believe. But ultimately, the big question is who has to report? If you can go back one slide. Yep. The question is who has to report? And there is a definition of who the reporting company is. And it's the company's obligation to do the reporting. And so a reporting company is defined in the law as an entity that is created through a filing with your, for us, it would be the Ohio Secretary of State, or its equivalent. So then you go back and go, okay, well, so what kind of entities have to file to get created? And you're thinking of corporations, limited liability companies. Those are the two most popular.
Okay.
So in general, every limited liability company created, every corporation created is going to have this filing obligation. And what happens if you're a sole proprietor? No, nothing needs to be created or filed for your sole proprietorship. It's just, as a matter of law, is created as soon as you start selling product. But you also have to remember what the definition of a sole proprietorship is. A sole proprietorship is you doing business in your own name. So for me, it would be Chris Corpus going out, making my cookies and selling them at a street fair, right? It's me selling the cookies. I've never created a limited liability company. I've never created a corporation. When I sign a contract, it's in my own personal name. I'm personally responsible. Now, what happens if I file for a trade name or a fictitious name? That is still me. It's Chris Corpus doing business as, the best cookies around. So it's still me. I'm still the one responsible. So if you're a sole proprietorship, based on my review of the Corporate Transparency Act, I do not believe you have will have a filing requirement because you're not a reporting company, and they know who you are. The whole
Right.
point of this Corporate Transparency Act is we don't know who these corporate entities are. So
Right.
if you make a trade name filing, it's like, best cookies ever. Who submitted this trade name filing? Chris Corpus. Then you're like, okay, we know who filed that because I filed it. So I do not believe a sole proprietor has a reporting obligation. And if if you are a reporting company, if there is a change in your information, you move, you bring another owner on, an owner's ownership is redeemed, or something to that effect, then you do have the obligation to file an update within 30 days of that change. But
Okay.
once you file, if there's never any change to your filing, or to the information you filed, then it's a one-time filing.
Okay.
So
Okay. Okay. So large businesses,
yeah. So again,
that's
the whole purpose of the Corporate Transparency Act is focused on small businesses. So larger businesses are exempt from filing. And so
okay.
what's the definition of a large business? It's 20 or more full-time equivalent employees. And if you have $5 million in gross receipts or sales, and also you have to have a physical presence here in the United States.
Okay.
So if you can click off all three of those boxes, then you are also exempt from your filing requirement.
Okay.
And when I just off the top of my head, when I look at my client mix, that's maybe no more than 10 clients. The vast majority of my clients are all going to fall less than 20 employees, less than $5 million in gross sales.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a very narrow exception. The vast majority of all my clients are going to have to file.
Well, and that's why we're doing this, because the 99% of who the SBDC works with falls in the area of having to do this. So yeah, I'm glad we're doing this. So
right.
So what about inactive businesses?
So there is an exemption from filing if you're an inactive business, but you have to click off all these boxes. You have to be in existence for more than 1 year. You are no longer engaged in business. No owners are foreign persons. Everyone's, here, domestically in the United States. In the prior 12 months, no ownership change. In the prior 12 months, you have not sent or received $1,000 or more. And then you're considered inactive. But the problem is, if the federal government, if FinCEN, who you file this with, ultimately does a check of the Ohio Secretary of State's database to try to say, okay, is there anyone who hasn't filed, and your company comes up, and you're like, well, yeah, we didn't file because we're inactive. Now you got some explaining to do. Why didn't you file? Who knows what FinCEN is going to ultimately do regarding businesses that haven't filed or complied? And you're like, well, I didn't have to file because I'm inactive. I don't, I'm part of your exemption, but no one knows that. So from that perspective, and from the perspective of identity theft, my suggestion is this is a good time to clean up your house and dissolve the company.
That's so good.
Yeah, because
that.
identity theft is so rampant. You're like, I know my identity got stolen and someone tried to file workers' comp benefits in my name for one of my clients that I'm the statutory agent for. And I got the notice that I was trying to file for unemployment benefits. Like, this is nuts.
That's crazy.
And but just think about that. Those are businesses that you're actively monitoring. So if you have this inactive business that you're no longer actively monitoring, who knows what's going on with identity theft with that potential entity? So my suggestion is this is another good reason to say, okay, let's dissolve this business and be that chapter. Like, I had a company that I created with someone else. It just the business that it just never turned up. The opportunity never materialized like we thought it would. And so I talked with that person and we agreed, dissolve the company, be done with it, so we don't have this quote unquote inactive. And we would fall within the definition of inactive, but I'm like, I'm not messing with it. Let's just dissolve it and be done. And they agreed.
Right. So. No, that's great. That's great information. So where do you report?
Yeah, so then you have the reporting is going to go through FinCEN, which is part of the SEC, and the FinCEN is Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. You would think of them when there's a violation of some sort of SEC law or regulation. in that FinCEN, they're in the process of creating a portal for all this information to be submitted. And that portal is not active until January 1st, 2024. Then they're going to flip a switch and everyone's going to be able to start filing immediately.
I can't
I'm
imagine.
mentioning to my clients that I'm not, I'm going to start gathering information for the clients that would like me to assist them, but I'm probably not filing anything in the month of January. I figure there's going to be a ton of,
Right.
what do you want to say? Hiccups,
Right.
glitches that are going to need to be worked out, and might as well let other people work those out. And once those get worked out, then start
Right.
filing. So
Right. I can't imagine what's going to happen. So, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
right now I have not seen anywhere where you can file by fax or by paper. Everything I've seen is it's all electronic through this portal that's going to get created.
Yeah. When do you file? Because that does affect like for your current clients, yes, you can wait till after January, but some clients, if you do your LLC, I believe January 1st, you have to file pretty quickly.
You do, yeah. So if your company is in existence as of December 31st, 2023, then you have until December 31st, 2024 to comply. So you have a whole year to comply.
Okay.
And then FinCEN just came out with a new an update to the law on November 30th, 2023, that if you create a business between January 1st, 2024 and December 31st, 2024, originally you needed to submit your filing within 30 days. But that has ultimately been extended now officially to 90 days.
Oh, good.
So now if you create a business in 2024, you have 90 days to comply. Like for myself, I'm not going to create a business for a client unless they already provide me the information to comply.
Sure.
I'm not going to file a business and then chase a client around, because
Right.
this is too important. It's a mandatory obligation. And so
Right.
when I create a business for a client, they'll have already have provided me with all the information to comply. But now you
Okay.
have 90 days.
Okay.
But that's a short-lived reprieve, because if you create a business on January 1st, 2025 or later, you're back to 30 days. So
Okay.
it's a 1 year, 90-day reprieve for new businesses,
Okay.
because they're figuring,
And
like, everyone's still trying to figure this out and how to comply.
who reports this information?
So there's two groups of people who have to report. One of them is called the applicant. So if you are a reporting company, if you do have a reporting obligation, then there's two groups of people who have to report. One of them is called the applicant. In Ohio, that person would be called the organizer of a limited liability company or the incorporator of a corporation. That's the person who signed the paperwork to create the company.
Okay.
So that person's information is going to need to be disclosed on the report.
Okay. And who is the beneficial owner? What does that mean?
There's two groupings of what's defined to be a beneficial owner. The one that is typical is someone who owns 25% or more of the equity of the company. And for me, probably the vast majority of my clients are probably a sole owner company. And then maybe 25%, I have two owners, and maybe, there's three owners, but generally I don't get beyond three owners. So anyone who owns 25% or more of the equity of the company has to report. And if someone is not an owner, but exercises substantial control over the company, that person also has to report, almost like they're pulling the strings from the background. And as I sit here, you're almost thinking like, hey, I'm not allowed to own the company because of some particular law, or I don't want to be disclosed, but I'm having like a straw man own the company for me. And then so that person would have to report. But as I sit here and think about my client mix, I don't have anybody who would fall into that second category of exercises substantial control.
Okay.
But that's what they're trying to get at, is who's the person in the background pulling the strings.
Right. And so most of our clients are going to have, they're in the background pulling the strings. So, you made your LLC, you've got to go in and you're the beneficial owner, basically, right?
Yeah, because you're the owner. You're
right.
literally
You're the owner. So you
of
have to be disclosed. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, you're the owner of the equity.
Right.
And for you, your clients are probably very similar to mine, sole owners.
Right.
Right. And so you own 100% of your equity. So yes, you have to comply.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Okay.
and then there are exceptions. If you can go back, if you
Sure.
can go back one slide, there are exceptions on who has to report: minors, employees, creditors, people who, are affiliated with your company, but they're not a true owner. So there are
Okay.
some exceptions. And again, I don't have anyone that's going to fall within that category, but there are exceptions on who has to report as a beneficial owner.
Okay. So what information is being reported?
Yeah, so from my perspective, this is just one more government database that is going to have information of yours that's probably already on file with the IRS. You have to, whoever reports, whether it's the applicant or beneficial owner, has to disclose their full legal name, date of birth, current street address, whether it's a business or residential. Apparently, you could use either because it says or
Okay.
in the rules. And then you have to use your current driver's license, state ID, or passport number has to be disclosed. And then a copy of whatever that document you used is, whether it's a driver's license, state ID, or passport, will also have to be uploaded. So while
That's a
yes,
yeah.
yes, it seems kind of intrusive, but ultimately the IRS probably has the same information.
Absolutely. It's just, this is where you want to be very careful protecting yourself online and all of that stuff, and make sure are aware of potential, you know, identity theft, right? So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
this is not a public data. Yeah, this is not this
right.
FinCEN
It's not
report and database. It is not a public database. People will
right,
not be able to search it and find out who
right.
the owners of companies are. It's truly only going to be able to use for law enforcement purposes. There are protocols put in place to minimize the ability to share this information from FinCEN to another government entity. But
Okay.
truly, it's going to be used for law enforcement purposes only. It is not a searchable public database.
Okay. And what are some penalties if you don't register?
Yeah, this is pretty. It's considered a violation if you willfully provide false or fraudulent information, or if you willfully fail to report. And if you
Mm-hmm.
say, "Well, I didn't know," I think it could be considered willful, because
Yeah,
you're expected to know. Even though, like,
right.
someone goes, "So when am I going?" I talk to someone. They're, "When am I going to find out information about this?" I'm like, "You already have." They're like, "No, I haven't." I'm like, "You're deemed to figure it out." Right. I
Right.
mean, it's so,
Yeah.
yeah. So ultimately,
Yeah.
it's, if you don't report, I would say they could probably consider that to be willful.
Okay.
And then the penalties, right? You can see them here: $500 per day. And you can get fined $10,000, and you can go to jail for 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
Right. I mean, it's brutal.
It is
It's almost like you're
brutal.
almost like it's like you're in the world of like tax avoidance,
Right.
and these other types of penalties. So that's pretty, pretty what do you want to say, significant, what
Yes.
these penalties are for failure to comply. So,
Goodness. Okay.
and again, so you're like, okay, I filed,
Yeah.
yeah, say it's mom and dad, say it's dad and daughter own a business.
Mhm.
Dad's getting ready to retire. When they report, dad owns 50%, daughter owns 50%. 9 months later, 18 months later, dad retires and gets redeemed. Within 30 days of that redemption of dad, the daughter has an obligation to update the report and remove dad as an owner.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, I didn't know that. But
Yeah.
ultimately, yeah, there's going to be that obligation. That's where I think people are going to get goofed up, is they're going to fail to notify their attorney or accountant that there is an update, and they're going to fail to file
I
that
do
update.
too. I think that's going to be a huge problem. And then it will see, do they really enforce these penalties, right? I would think they would if they're putting it out there. So,
There's
um,
always discretion.
right.
Um,
But yes, this is why this topic is so important. And you've
yeah.
shared a lot about this over the last few months in your newsletters and things like that. I mean, you made me aware of this maybe last year even, or within the last year. So,
Yeah.
but since it's coming up, we wanted to have this discussion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And a lot of people and commentators were thinking that the federal government was going to delay the start date from January 1, 2024. And I think because of that, a lot of people were thinking hey, I don't really need to worry about compliance or getting ready to have to, help my clients to comply because I'm just going to pick this date. It's not a true date, but that is everything I've seen. It is starting January 1st, 2024. The only reprieve is that 90-day additional window for creating a new business in 2024. Other than that, we're pedal to the metal come January 1, 2024. This is happening.
All right.
So,
Well, thank you very much. And if anyone has any questions, you can certainly reach out to me and I can get them to Chris, or you can email Chris directly. But I can't stress this enough. And I'm so glad that we chatted about this today, Chris, that, I think what happens is a lot of our business owners, they're just maybe doing their thing out of their home, right? But they got their LLC or what, but so there's no choice, right? It's not like,
nope.
I just kind of dabble, but once you've gotten that LLC or corporation or whatever entity, you need to do this.
Oh yeah, if you're doing $100 a year in business and if you create a limited liability company or corporation, you got to comply.
Yep. So
right.
That's what we really want to stress. Yes. So all right. Thank you all so much. And I'll talk to you soon, Chris.
It was good talking. Thanks, Beth.